What's going on, guys? It's Danny from Slow Restoration, and today in the garage we got a couple more how-tos that are going to come off this. It's a 2006 Buick Rendezvous. It is an all-wheel drive, and if we go around the front here, we'll pop the hood. It does have the 3.5 liter or the 3500 V6. So we're going to do a few things to this. One is we're going to give it a tune-up. Don't know if it's ever been done or not, but we're going to show you how to do a tune-up. We're probably going to break it down into different videos, but tune up, front wheel bearings, and this actually has the hollow sway bar, and they have the habit of cracking. So we're going to replace the whole sway bar at one shot, and links and all. So we'll show you how to do that also. But let's get into this. We'll get it up in the air and get the front wheels pulled off. So first step, once we have the wheel off, we're actually going to turn the wheel to whatever side you're working on. Get you access to the back side here. I know everyone wants to know socket sizes and torque specs. The problem with that is, even with the same model, sometimes they change that in the same model year, make, model, whatever. So sometimes this may not, even though I give you the exact socket sizes, it may change according to your particular truck or car, depending on where it was built. Regardless, so this is a 15 millimeter. We're going to remove the caliper mounting bracket, which is this whole piece. There's a bolt here, one up top. Once we remove those bolts, this whole piece with the caliper and the brake pads will come off in one shot. We'll tie it up to the strut up here so it stays out of the way. We'll go ahead and pull the rotor off, but again, that's a 15 millimeter, but it may change on your particular one. Removed, hung up on there so it won't fall off. Our rotor has obviously been off before, so it will literally just pull right off. I can get my hand on the back side of it, and there exposes your bearing itself. So the next step is we're going to pull our new one out, match it up. So here's our new bearing, and obviously we're going to hold it up there. They're both 5 lug. 3 bolts actually hold it on to the spindle. There's an ABS plug, and this one's got a short one. Some of them have a longer lead that run up inside the engine compartment. This one is shorter. It appears to be correct for this application, so we'll go ahead and move on and start disassembling this. One thing to note, they do recommend, let me set this down. They do recommend replacing your axle nut whenever you remove that nut. So as you can see, this is kind of a stove locker or self-locking nut. So they do always recommend replacing that. And if you get a quality bearing, this one did come with it already, so we didn't have to buy it separately. You don't have to get the most expensive bearing out there, but definitely make sure it's a quality bearing. It looks decent, feels good, and it should last you a good while. With the most important thing with reinstalling it is that torque that you put on this nut here, which puts preload on the bearing itself. So the next thing we're gonna do after we match that up is remove the nut off the axle here, and then we can actually push the axle through, which will give us a little bit more room to remove these 3 bolts. One here, there's one there, and one on the back side there. And like I said, if you remove that, the axle will relax back a little bit and give you a little bit more access to do that. The 3 bolts that hold the bearing to the actual spindle that go through are 13 millimeter on this particular one, may change on yours. And the axle nut will change, especially if it's been replaced with an aftermarket one. An impact makes short work of this. Once that's off, you can push this axle through. Sometimes they push right through. Sometimes you got to take a mallet and drive that through. But like I said, once you get that back a little bit, you get a lot more access to these 3 bolts. And we'll go ahead and back them off. And then sometimes these bearings fall right off. Sometimes they take some persuasion with a hammer to get them off, and possibly a chisel. The only other thing we need to unhook is this sensor wire right here. We'll unhook it from the clip and then just unplug the wiring harness here. So once we have that, then the bearing will come right out, like I said, as soon as we get these 3 bolts out and persuade that to let go. And this one is a little stubborn. We did one thing to note, this back bolt here where this wire clips onto was actually a stud, and it had a bracket sticking off to hold the ABS sensor wire, and it had kind of a bit of a shield on it. So this is a little stuck, so we'll get our hammer here and persuade it. We're obviously replacing the bearing, so we're not worried about damaging the bearing. Just make sure you don't hit anything around it, and we'll just tap out, spin that, keep tapping, and it should break loose pretty good. You can also soak this down with some penetrating oil. Will help a little bit. Once you get that to break loose, you just slip it off the end of the axle here. It does have a sheet metal piece, and as you can see there, our sensor part of the bearing actually stayed in the spindle, and we were getting erratic signals from that sensor, so that just goes to show it was bad. So we'll get the rest of that out. Shouldn't be too hard, and then we'll prep this, clean everything, prep it, and get ready for our new bearing. So once we have that back on, torque these 3 bolts back down, and again, your year, make, model may vary as far as torque spec. So once we have them down, we'll put this bracket, sheet metal bracket back on, put the nut back on, and then we can route our wire. Your wire comes through the spindle in between the axle, so we'll bring it around this bracket. We're going to push it down and snap it into place here. You can hear it snap in. They're pretty tight. You don't want that coming loose. That looks good. And then the only other thing is to actually plug this in from the bottom side here. You can hear them snap in too. Once we have that done, we're getting pretty close. We'll put the axle nut back on, and we'll torque that in a minute. Make sure that spins on nice. Once it hits the end of the threads here, this is a self-locking nut, so it's going to get tight. So they don't recommend this, but I take my impact, run it up just to get the threads back, and then torque it from there. You can torque this one of 2 ways. You can put the brake assembly back together, have someone hold the brake while you torque it, or you can let this down just so there's enough weight on that tire to keep it from spinning. Whatever your preference is, we're by ourselves, so we'll have to do whatever we can. All right, we got it all back together. Like I said, the only thing we have to do is torque that center nut. This particular one gets torqued to 190 some foot-pounds, but again, double check your application because they're all slightly different and can change the same year, just whatever. Just double check your application, make sure you get that right. That is the most important. Well, getting it back together correctly, but the torque spec here puts preload on the bearing and will make your bearing fail sooner or last a long time. So make sure you get that right. We'll put our wheels back on, and once we get those torqued and we are done. We did do both sides. So the next step we have to do is actually put a new sway bar on because this one is cracked. I'll show you real quick. You can see right there, it's cracked, and on the other side it's actually cracked and starting to spiral around. Pretty common on these, so let's start by opening that up and making sure it looks like what we have on the car. So here is our new bar. Pretty nice unit. It's much heavier. This is actually a solid bar that's wedged in on the end, so probably not going to crack, probably going to last a lot longer. This is a nice kit. It's a Dorman. It does give you everything you need. So end link bushings. Like I said, here's the actual mounting bushings and the strap, and they even give you new bolts to go through there. So this looks like the same one that's on it. We kind of match it up. Once we get the old one off, we'll set them side by side and match it up, make 100% sure, but it looks at first glance to be the same. So first thing we're going to do is, and we already did that, get rid of the end links. So The nut did back off. We took the top bushing off. These really get corroded in there, so do whatever you have to get them out. We're not saving them. We have new. Sometimes you gotta cut them, sometimes you gotta break them, you know, whatever it takes. We'll get that out, and then we'll go ahead and remove 2 bolts per side that hold these mounting bushings on. Sway bar mounting bushing. We'll get both sides of them off, and then we'll be able to twist and turn and pull. It looks like the sway bar will go out of the passenger side, from the driver's side to the passenger side. Looks like it's going to be the easiest way, but we'll know as soon as we get this unhooked. We did get the old bar out. That is actually the old bar, and that's the way it comes out of the car. So it kicks kind of forward, and it does come out of the car from the driver's side through the passenger side. So through this way, and it's the easiest way is to pop these. There's no way of showing it as I'm doing it because it's just, you can't see anything. So the easiest way is to pop these straps off both sides, get rid of the rubber bushing, and then you kind of pull the arm this way, give it a tilt, and just kind of keep wiggling it back and forth. It will come out. The old one comes out a little bit easier than the new one goes in, but it's kind of the same deal. So we have it back in now, and we have our bushings put on, we have the straps put down, all the bolts started, and we're going to loosely tighten everything up. We do have to do our end links here, and that should center everything up as we start tightening this up. Here's our new end links, and pretty self-explanatory. There's a sleeve in the middle, and then in between these 2 tapered pieces is where either the A-arm or the sway bar is going to go. So I'll kind of start here and show you as I go. So we're going to start with everything removed but the bottom washer and the bottom bushing. We're going to put that through, and then we need to put that center piece with both of the bushings. It's actually right here on this particular one. On the Dorman ones, this is all kind of connected, so that's kind of one piece that will go in between the A-arm and the sway bar. So we'll have to take the sway bar up a little bit, and then it'll just get that bushing and that nut and washer on the top to snug it all up. So that's how it looks as it's all assembled there. As you can see, the bar does have to come this way a little bit, and that'll straighten that end link up. We'll get our other side installed that far. We got the bushing here and the strap, the bolts tightened up on both sides, and we went ahead and snugged up the end links here. Again, pretty self-explanatory. Well, GoPro battery died, but the rule of thumb, like I was saying, is to tighten that bushing up till it swells out to about the size of the washer, and you should be good. So we're all back together. We have our tires back on, and we should be good to go now. If you like the content, please subscribe, hit the like button. Thanks for stopping by. Have a good day.